I might just kick off with a brief introduction just to get things started, and then we can get your presentation underway. Barbara, how does that sound?
Yep, sounds good.
Perfect. Hey, thanks everyone that is here today. We're the Environment Committee is very excited to be starting this webinar series with Barbara. As far as introduction for myself, I'm Ellie Hopwood from PharmaPack. I chair the Environment Committee. I'll just do a little introduction of the rest of the committee as well. We've got Rodney Bennett on the committee from Bonson. Got Mark Gallagher from Cyan, Gavin Fong from PlusPack, Mel Maxwell from Avient, Rochelle Morrison from Chemiplas, Ella Measle from Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. We've got Sandy Botterill, who I know most people will know from Plastics New Zealand, Rachel Barker and Simon Wilkinson from Plastics New Zealand. So yeah, we're thrilled to be running these series of lunch and learns with Barbara. I know for most here, Barbara will need little introduction because she's somewhat of a legend in the space of sustainability, carbon and life cycle assessments as well. So Barbara, I'll let you take it over from here, and maybe if there's anything else you want to add in your introduction. So just to give everyone an overview, we'll run through the presentation with Barbara, and then we'll have time at the end for a Q&A session as well. Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. Yes.
Thanks very much for the kind words of introduction. And yeah, it's great to be here. I thought I'd start with sort of what's the business case for sustainability and why. For those of you who don't know us, we are a team of now over 40 people, 40 sustainability experts in about 10 cities in Australia and New Zealand. So we're quite widespread. But we've got one mission, and that is to succeed sustainably and help others to do that. What we do is a whole range of things, and I quite like to group them into sort of the more corporate side of sustainability, as in how do you do business and what's the overall strategy, and then the product related side of sustainability. So that's where we do life cycle assessment, cradle to cradle certification, carbon footprinting, look at packaging. And while this is an ever-growing list of things we do, I don't think we need to get focused too much on the details, because what we actually do is identify the connections between all those different initiatives. So when you do a life cycle assessment study, some of the findings might influence the procurement process or the overall strategy on how you actually go forward with products. And a life cycle assessment obviously also gives you your carbon footprint. It can be a starting point for cradle to cradle certification. So it's actually identifying those links, what is really important, because there are so many synergies between all of those different initiatives. So we actually are about all that bit in the middle. To the question on why do most organizations do that, I have got a little poll here for you. So what are the sustainability drivers in your organization? So if you just can give a quick answer, I think multiple answers are possible. Would be good to hear from you. We can say a lot of it is customer driven. We get that a lot. There is some investor requests. What I think is really good to see is that some are starting to see it from a risk mitigation point of view, and only very few on cost savings. There actually can be quite a few cost savings. So marketing, that's very often a starting point. But if we take marketing, customer demand, investor requests, that's sort of all the outward facing drivers. And risk mitigation really is more the inside one. So those together already give us a little bit of the what's the business case for doing it. I'll come to those topics a bit later. Now, if we look at those different reasons, I thought it might also be good for this first one in the series to actually start with a bit of a definition of what do we all think when we talk about sustainability, and what other definitions have we heard or are floating around. Quite often now it's ESG. Before that it was CSR. Then I often get the question, oh, now when we do a strategy, should we call that an ESG strategy or a sustainability strategy? And then we talk about it and go, well, they're slightly different, but they all lead to the same thing. And then we go, but isn't that all triple bottom line accounting? Well, yes, it is, but that's more the accounting side of things rather than the strategy side of things. So I guess all of those roughly describe the same thing. And then more recently, TCFD has come in. And so how does that relate? And I'll have a little bit of an explanation on what TCFD actually means. That's a task force for climate-related financial disclosure. And that starts alluding a little bit to the business case and business drivers, business value, because as soon as you talk climate and financial, we're starting to actually bring the two a bit closer together. But even if we are clear that those roughly mean the same, still everyone has a little bit of a different view on what does sustainability actually mean. Quite often we get, no, we're not really doing much in sustainability, but we probably should be measuring our carbon footprint. So is carbon the one thing in sustainability, or is it the environment, or possibly people, or possibly all of those? So it's really hard to say, well, we just need to focus on carbon because the marine environment is just as important. So are the people. And I think that came already quite clear in 87 when Gro Harlem Brundtland basically delivered us the definition for sustainable development. And that is to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. It doesn't talk about environmental or social or governance, but that is what we need in order to fulfill this. And what I really like most about the quote is that it is not a definition of sustainability, but it talks about sustainable development. Because there is not really a clear, this is sustainable, this is not sustainable. Because it really needs to be, we need to improve and develop to be more sustainable. Someone asked me, how would you define a green product? Well, a green product to me would be painted green. It's just the color, because only one product can only be greener or more sustainable than another. But absolute sustainable is quite difficult because there are so many different facets to sustainability. If we look at those SDGs, there are 17 different topics that we could cover, especially when we look at your results before marketing, customer demand, investor requests. Oh, what are they asking? Some of the investors would be asking, do you have carbon under control? They would want you to be compliant, to have a modern slavery statement coming soon for New Zealand, but if you were active in Australia, you'd have to have it now. So there are all those sorts of different types of topics. So I quite like the SDGs as a way to focus, to identify which one of those are the relevant ones. And even though one organization can't do them all, what I think is quite important to see that if you'd focused on one of them, to not do something that has a negative impact on another. And this here is just a different way of looking at them. It's first of all, we actually do need an environment, because if we didn't have an environment, we wouldn't have anywhere to live. That's why there are 4 SDGs around the biosphere, the environment. They're about biodiversity, oceans, clean water, climate. If we have that, then we can have a society. And that is no poverty, zero hunger, equality, education, those types of goals. And then we can have goals that focus on the economy. It's not necessarily order of priority, but basically, if we don't have people, we can't have an economy. So there is a little bit of a hierarchy here. And the most important one, I think, is 17, which is the partnership for the goals, because no business can do it on their own. Bringing it back to businesses, I think we could divide it into social, environmental, economic. And then the G for ESG is governance all around it. And that means we've actually anchored it into the business for good, rather than, well, we're doing one thing now because we have got a bit of cash left over, or an investor is just asking for it right now, so let's quickly find an answer. If it's all embedded in the governance of the organization, it's not going to go away and will actually stay there. So that's why we would draw it that way. So you've got your E, S, and G, but I do think we need the economic drivers too, for it to actually gain traction in a business. And that's perfectly fine. I think if there is an economic drive to do it, that's a really good reason to do it. I don't have any problem if the main driver is not, oh, we need to do something right for the environment. If that is an outcome, then that's perfectly fine, because that's what we'd actually need to get. And a business that is doing well, also economically, will have a lot more resources to actually keep doing the right thing. So having the economic drivers, I think, is quite important. And that is where that business case for sustainability really comes in. So to me, those different definitions, ESGs really are that lens to assess the performance. CSR, you could look at a way of reporting of what has happened. It's not so much forward-looking, whereas the performance really is more forward-looking. And the SDGs, they actually can help to build and build a strategy to identify what the focus is. I'll skip over the next one real quickly. So a business-focused definition is about delivering value in financial, environmental, social, and ethical terms. And the Dow Jones brings in that risk element as well. So it's about long-term value for the shareholder, so that's financial, including opportunities and risks. And that really is, I think, quite important when we think about the business value. And again, that came through here in the drivers that we saw earlier. That risk component here comes in, and I guess the opportunities really are in this customer demand aspect. But then, what do we actually mean with those? So environmental, there can be a whole lot of different topics, and the social will have staff development, we have community outcomes, and governance is then really to actually have, say, someone on the board who's got responsibility, rather than the self-appointed sustainability champion. When we started 15 years ago, it was largely the self-appointed sustainability champion in a company reaching out to us saying, oh, I really want to do this project. Can you help us make a case for it? And what do I need to do to convince others in the business? What we now have is CEOs reaching out saying, I get pressure from my board, I get pressure from customers and my staff. I really need to do something, but I don't know where to start. So it has shifted quite a lot. We still have the case that the sustainability champion in a business wants to do a project and they just don't get it because they can't make a case for it. So I was curious, has that happened to any of you, that you had a project that you wanted to do, a sustainability project, and it got rejected because of fundings? It's about half-half. It's very encouraging. Did the ones who said no, does that mean you've got all the projects you wanted to do approved, or did you maybe not apply for that many? That could also be. But it does mean that quite a few of you already also had funding declined for a sustainability project. So what I thought we'd do is to see if we can find a way to change that. And I find that a lot of the times the reason for the decline is that there is the tribe, there is us here in the room, I click myself, who are the sustainability tribe. And our language is emissions and green and renewable and regenerative and sustainability and emissions, biodiversity. That's our vocabulary. And then there are the ones who hold the purse strings, and they understand the language of customers, of business, of finance, of return on investment, on dollars, on interest rates. And it's just a whole different language. And that, I think, is often the reason for not getting through with those ideas. Really, it's just a language thing. And that's why we've come up with the business value framework for sustainability. So a number of things we're looking at here. One is revenue. That needs to go up, or at least needs to stay the same. We've got cost, which for every business should go down. Then we've got brand, enhancing our brand. Every business wants to improve their brand, and every business wants to reduce their risk. So if we would be able to find a link between those sustainability projects that we want to do and revenue, cost, brand, or risk, we'd have a far greater chance of actually getting them approved. And under risk, there's also compliance, because if you don't comply with requirements, there is a chance you need to pay a fine, or that customers are turning away, so that you won't get access into certain markets. So some of the drivers here really would be, if you were a listed company, looking at the rules, you need to comply with them. And there is a little nugget in the NZX listing rules that really helps to get sustainability strategy projects over the line. And that is, yep, we all know financial reporting should be balanced, clear, and objective, but also an issuer should provide non-financial disclosure, including considering environmental, economic, social, and sustainability factors and practices, and how those targets are measured. So, well, if that isn't a good case, to actually first of all identify the areas that an organization needs to do something in, or to then go and measure them. And for those on the line who are not a listed company, but a fairly small company, that still is relevant, because you might be supplying to some of those listed companies and you're in their supply chain. And if you know they need to do this, you can provide information along with your product to help them fulfill their compliance requirements. And that gives you an advantage, a competitive advantage. So you're not actually just selling the thing, but also your thing plus the information they need to for compliance reasons. And if you frame that in your application, to a sustainability project, you'd already increase your chances of getting that funded internally. That's where some of the business value is. Mandatory carbon reporting is coming. The same thing here. It might not apply directly, but it will apply to some of your customers. And then there is voluntary reporting. So there is a survey every year, the Better Futures report, and they say 74% of all people warn that companies are placing profits before people, but it means they will lose their trust forever. So while people might not make actually a decision to buy a more sustainable good, a lot of surveys say they do, but if you follow the money, sometimes it might not be the case. But on the other hand, once you've done something and you've lost trust, it's really hard to get that customer back. Why do people come and work for a business? It's because they identify with the value of that business. Because at the moment, it's really I think, an employee market out there. Everyone's looking for staff, and employees can choose who they work for. And it is for businesses that actually have the right values. And I did actually have a case where a sustainability manager came to me and said, oh, I really want to do this project. I just can't get it approved because they say we're struggling with keeping people. And we just had another 2 people leaving, and we just really need to focus on that. And I said, well, okay, so the project you want to do is a biodiversity strategy for the business. And it has, say, a value of 30K. And now go back to your finance people who need to approve it with a little bit more information. So first of all, you go to HR and ask, what is the cost for losing a person and recruiting a person? And I think the number they came back with was about up to 20K, because it's all the time of the senior people who need to do the interviews. It's HR who need to sift through lots of CVs. There is a bit of unrest in the team, productivity goes down, then there is lost information. People need to be brought up to speed. And if you would keep those people, you'd actually save 20K per person. So she went back with that information. So, well, if we do this project, we're actually demonstrating to our staff we're doing the right thing and we might keep them. That could save us 40K if it is 2 people. And they're like, oh yeah, we hadn't thought about it that way. And that is a translation piece of the sustainability language, translating it into actual dollars. And the other aspect on a risk side of things would be, quite often we just talk about what is the impact that we have, our emissions. But there is also impact from the climate on our organization. And if we can do something to minimize this, that does save dollars. Because this here is a classic way. You report what you're emitting, but what could be impact that climate change actually has on the business? That could be physical risks. If you, at the moment, I live on the Kapiti Coast, we had a few really bad storms going through, and roofs have been ripped off. If you were close to the coast, then you might have sea level rising. So there are actual physical risks due to climate change, but there are also transition risks, because everyone is putting strategies in place to reduce, say, the need of fossil fuels. So if you were in the coal mining industry, there is a bit of a transition risk because of climate change, because you might not be planning another 50 years in your business mining coal. So due to climate change, some businesses will have to transition, and there is a risk. And exploring what the options are or what other business models could be will help again to minimize those risks. And then there are also, of course, opportunities. So if we look at that business value framework again, looking at any of those sustainability projects or initiatives through the lens of, well, how does that help me to keep a customer? How does it help me to get new customers? Do we actually need to do a bit of innovation? And then here in cost reduction, it's not just switching off from our standard lights to LED, which saves cost, but it's also in employee productivity and keeping employees in the business. That's not real cost savings. To lenses to look at and to find an angle on those sustainability initiatives to communicate them differently. And that's where we see really the business value. And that's why we call that framework our translation tool from the greenie language to the business language. Any questions?
Brilliant. That was fantastic. Thank you, Barbara. So I have had a couple of questions that have been fired through. This one, which is quite interesting. How can we expect customer demand for sustainable products and packaging to change over the next 5 years, both in terms of volume of questions and what you think sort of the type of questions we might start being asked? I mean, the landscape's obviously changing a lot.
I think it's coming down to those global commitments like the plastic pact, for example, but also is it either renewable or recyclable? And then I think with the recyclable, where it really comes to, is it like really recyclable? Is in the market that it ends up in? And is the infrastructure around? And I think we'll find more evidence-based decisions, for example, there was a lot of drive on compostable packaging, but then I think we're starting to see more evidence on, yes, technically it can be composted, but composting facilities would only take it because they can, not because they actually want it, because it doesn't have any nutritional value for the soil. So I think we'll see more fact-based information on that. Increase in employee productivity, value chain efficiency by sustainability initiatives, I think is the question.
Yes, great.
I think it is about one thing is to do, I don't know what they're called, like climate surveys in the organization. How do people actually identify with the business? And I think employee retention is probably the easiest one to measure. And also asking new recruits on why have they joined. And you'd probably find that quite often it is because they want to, that's what we're finding at least. We get quite a few that say, well, I really find you because you're a certified B Corp. So we're not just doing the work on sustainability, but we actually are walking the talk. At least we are doing our best to do that. But new recruits do notice that. And that's why they come to us.
This is a very topical. So this has been sent through. We're a small plastics manufacturer that's never done anything on sustainability. Where would you recommend we start?
I would start identifying from your team what is most relevant to them. Ask the key stakeholders, what do you expect us to do? And out of that, start developing a priority of topics, because you can't do it all, but every organization, I think, can measure, for example, their carbon footprint. That's something that everyone can do. MFE have put out really good guidelines and support documents, even interactive Excel documents, so that you can get started. And then I think it's really talking to the supply chain and staff. What do they think is most relevant?
And sort of what links in from there is that there's so many competing interests when you think about sustainability. So how can an organisation know where they'll get the biggest sustainability return?
Well, I think it's that having the good conversation with the stakeholders who actually are asking for the information. Have a good look at what are the drivers. Why do you want to do a certain initiative, or why do you want to get started on the sustainability journey? Because it's easy to say, well, everyone should, but why specifically? And that helps prioritizing, and that will then also help to see where can you actually gain the quickest wins, if you like.
Yeah, fantastic. And just one last one here. What role do you see the Commerce Commission playing in the future when it comes to sustainability advertising?
Fair communication, really. That we actually know that claims are based on facts, because there is so much green information out there. But I think we just really need to come to fact-based information, and that's where I see the Commerce Commission will help to actually to cut through some of we are the greenest product, because I don't think any product could ever say they are the greenest. That would mean they would have to compare against every single other product. That's clearly not possible.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Barbara. That was a great run through on, the business case for sustainability. And we really look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time for the carbon topic, which is fantastic.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much.
Anyone has any other questions, feel free to just send me an email.
Excellent. Thanks. We'll make sure that your details are circulated. So, and if anyone's got any other, suggestions on topics, etc., please send them through to Kelly at Plastics New Zealand. Yeah, thanks everyone for attending today, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.